This week, we discuss several new vehicles from Hyundai, including the Santa Cruz pickup and the Tucson SUV. We debate the usefulness of pickups as an everyday vehicle, and we answer audience questions, including one about damaged test cars at the Auto Test Center. Next on Talking Cars. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode. I'm Mike Monticello.
I'm Ryan Pizlakowski.
I'm Gabe Shenhar.
We're going to start off this week's episode a little different. We're going to kind of do like a sorry, not sorry portion here, where one of us brings up an opinion or a topic that maybe isn't shared with other folks, but that they feel pretty strongly about. And of course, don't forget, if you guys want to let us know whether you agree or disagree with the topic of discussion, you can send those questions, comments, 30-second video clips to TalkingCars@iCloud.com. So we're going to start with Mr. Gabe Shenhar. Gabe, it's my understanding you want to air some grievances about the lack of innovation in pickup trucks. Is that true?
Well, I wouldn't say grievances, but let's just say it's I don't get the attraction of and the popularity of pickup trucks because. Frankly, when you carry an open bed with you most of the time, you're just dragging a piece of length of vehicle that is not very useful. It's always a liability parking. You want to park the car parallel park on the street in Manhattan. It's a pain, such a long vehicle. And you don't have any luggage space, really. I mean, here's a true story. We went picking up my son a few years ago from the airport with luggage, and so we put everything in the bed, of course. And then we wanted to stop at a restaurant. So what do? I mean, you leave everything open to the elements and to the prying eyes of the public, or you transfer everything into the cab. So. And innovations have been pretty scarce in pickup trucks, other than, power gate and closing and opening and whatnot. But ever since the Chevy Avalanche, which had a folding midgate, or in other words, the bulkhead between the bed and the cab would be able to fold. So if you have something long to carry, then you can fold that midgate. Otherwise, I don't see why people wouldn't just drive Suburbans and Expeditions if they want to carry something long in an enclosed space.
All right. Well, you're an engineer, Gabe. So what kind of innovations have you been looking for? What do you think they should have come up with at this point?
Well, I think that a unified bed and cab is really an excellent thing. Right now, as you know, pickup trucks are body-on-frame chassis with a cab and a bed that are two different entities that sometimes don't do exactly the same kind of thing with all the twist and flex that's happening there. And it's gotten better, but that really compromises ride and handling and other things in pickup trucks. Okay,
Ryan, do you agree or disagree with Gabe?
I agree and I disagree. So he brings up some good points. I mean, the Avalanche. I personally loved the Avalanche. I thought that was a great what do you call that? A pickup truck SUV thing. It was it had the ability to flip that inner midgate, as Gabe called it, that bulkhead between the bed and the cab, and you could put stuff in there. But the key to all of that was having a tonneau cover. I think the key to having any of these trucks, even a regular pickup truck, is a tonneau cover. Now you have tons of space. Just not that long ago, we had the borrowed, that rented Ram TRX, and it had nice tonneau cover with like a sturdy tonneau cover on it. And I took it, and I did a bunch of stuff with it, but I had stuff in the bed, and wasn't worried about it because it's hidden underneath that tonneau cover. A lot of our test vehicles that we actually test we don't buy them with a tonneau cover. So like Gabe said, you have stuff in the back. Yeah, it's in the wide open. Everyone can see it, and you're worried about someone stealing it or whatever, depending on where you are. But innovations. I mean, a pickup truck is the beauty of a pickup truck to me is they're fairly simple. There isn't a lot of thrills going on. The new trucks have these huge cabs. The back seat's big. You can put 4 adults in there comfortably, and then you have that bed. And if you have a tonneau cover on it, it's brilliant. I think that's a lot of people are trading that for an SUV almost. They'd rather have that truck with the bed, because then when you flip that tail, or that tonneau cover up, you could stand a refrigerator up inside of that. You can't do that with an SUV. And then for me, I know towing is a big thing for them. It seems like I'm always towing something. Having a pickup truck's usually set up a little better for towing. So, but.
I disagree with Gabe a little bit. I mean, I think there have been some innovations. I personally think the pickups, especially the full-size pickups, have come a long ways in terms of how quiet they are. And when you look at something like the Ram 1500, it has a coil spring rear suspension. Okay, that's not an amazing innovation because cars have had coil spring rear suspensions forever, but it makes the ride so much better. That's still unique within the full-size pickup segment. But I look at something like GM's corner step bumper. Now, on the one hand, you may look at this thing and be like, well, why didn't they think of this, 30, 40 years ago? It's so simple, but so cool, where they carved this little foothold out of the side of the bumper, and then there's a little handhold on top of the bed, and it makes getting up into the bed so much easier. You don't have to worry about, folding down a step or anything like that. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I think when you look at the new F-150, it's fold-down gear selector. If you get this optional workspace inside and the ability to then you fold down the gear selector, and then you can unfold the center armrest into this wide kind of laptop spot, or you could, have lunch there. I mean, it'd be great if whether you're working or on a trip and you want to stop and have lunch, you got this nice flat space there. And then, of course, there's the F-150, the new hybrid, has this Pro Power onboard. So it becomes basically like a mobile generator, and you can get a version of that in the non-hybrid trucks as well. And then there's an optional version that's a 7.2 kilowatt system that could potentially power, most of your house in the event of a power outage. So, I mean, I know that, Gabe, I know what you're looking for. You're talking about why do these things have to drive so trucky? And I get where you're coming from 100%, but I think there have been some pretty cool things. But speaking of a pickup that maybe doesn't drive so trucky, want to kind of meld this into our next topic, which is the 2022 Hyundai Santa Cruz, which was just announced. And, the quick specs on this is it's based on the redesigned 2022 Hyundai Tucson. More to come on that later on in the show. This new truck that's coming out, it's going to have two powertrains, a 2.5 liter four-cylinder with an estimated 190 horsepower with an 8-speed automatic transmission, or a 2.5 liter turbocharged four-cylinder with an estimated 275 horsepower with a dual clutch 8-speed automatic transmission. You can get it in front or all-wheel drive, and it's going to be going on sale this summer. So, Gabe, what's the deal with the Santa Cruz, and is this more of what you're talking about, the kind of where you think pickups should be going?
Well, sort of, because it's based on the Tucson, as you said, so it's a car-based SUV, and this truck is just going to be pretty much fully independent suspension and a cab and a bed that are unified, kind of like the Honda Ridgeline in concept, although a little more down market, a little smaller. And so that provides a choice for someone who just occasionally needs an open bed. Let's say someone like me who's maybe going to take his barbecue to the beach or something like that, doesn't need a whole long thing. I don't think it's going to be enough to throw an adult-sized bike there even. And that's, it's basically a lifestyle kind of truck. So it's more, it's an extension of someone's personality, and it's going to be easier to park in an urban environment. And it kind of reminds me of the Subaru Brat of a few years ago, if you remember.
Yeah, the Brat from many years ago and the Baja from just a couple decades ago. It really reminds me of that. Ryan, what do you think of this thing so far? I know you're more on the pickup guy side like me.
But I can also appreciate this. I mean, I'll agree with something going back on what Gabe was talking about earlier about people buying maybe a full-size pickup truck that don't actually need a full-size pickup truck. So this is like the Ridgeline and when they the Subaru, the Baja, then now this thing is this would be very good for someone that doesn't need a full-size pickup truck, want to throw their bikes in the back, or go to the dump occasionally, transfer station to get rid of stuff at their house. And they don't need a full-size truck. This thing is easier to park, like Gabe said. It's going to be easier to park. There's no doubt about it. I mean, it's a smaller car, right? So I think it's looks wise, it's not my cup of tea. I like a little more boxy, trucky-ish stuff, but it's going to be, if it drives like the Tucson, which we'll talk about, it's going to be a nice little car to buzz around in and do stuff with. For those light duty things, why not?
Right. But here's the thing, guys. I mean, it's 16 inches shorter than the Ridgeline, which is already a small pickup in terms of
pickups. It is small.
The bed is tiny, and you bring up the Baja. The Baja was a sales flop. I mean, it's like you see a Baja now, it's like a unicorn. So, I mean, it's neat that they're doing it, but I don't know. It's definitely not for me, because I would like a big pickup bed. I mean, I don't even like these 5.5 foot beds on most of the pickups these days, because for me, the stuff I want to carry around, bicycles, especially motorcycles, I have to have the tailgate down. And for me, there's no, the point of a bed is to be able to keep stuff in the bed, not to have the tailgate down. Now I have to, bungee cord everything into the bed. But that's me. So Gabe, are we going to buy this new Santa Cruz?
If you'd like, we will.
Well, I think we have to, because this is what we do. All right. We have a full preview up on our website, consumerreports.org, about the Santa Cruz, so please check that out. Before we move on, we just want to talk about a potential giving moment for you folks out there. We want to talk about the TalkingCars donation program. If you don't know, Consumer Reports is a nonprofit organization. All the work we do, including this podcast, is provided for by memberships and by donations from you folks out there. So any little bit helps. We'd really appreciate it. You can find out more at cr.org/give TalkingCars. And now let's move on to what we're driving this week at the test track. And, we hinted earlier, and what we're driving this week is the 2022 Hyundai Tucson. We're going to be talking about our first drive impressions of this fourth generation of Hyundai's compact SUV. We actually rented two versions from Hyundai, and we also have purchased our own. This new Tucson is about 6 inches longer than the outgoing model. It's also a little bit taller, a little bit wider, and rides on a wheelbase that's about 3 inches longer. The standard engine is a 187 horsepower four-cylinder paired with an 8-speed automatic, available in front or all-wheel drive. There's also a hybrid that uses a 1.6-liter turbo four-cylinder with an electric motor for a total system output of 226 horsepower. It's mated to a 6-speed automatic, and a plug-in hybrid is coming later. The 2022 Tucson SEL all-wheel drive we purchased for our test program, which has the 187 horsepower engine, costs $31,969. Gabe, that's a pretty big intro, but this is a pretty cool-looking vehicle. What are your first impressions of the regular Tucson and the Tucson hybrid?
Yeah, first of all, it's a really striking design, in and out, and inside looks has this high-tech vibe, and just driving it, it's a major upgrade across the board in just about everything. It's roomy, it's relatively quiet for the class. Ride and handling seem pretty accomplished, and the powertrain, finally, it has a good powertrain that will satisfy many people. As you know, the previous generation had a pretty weak powertrain, and the turbocharge was linked with a pretty clunky automatic, so it the car fell between the cracks, but now it seems to be a pretty competitive entry, and I'm particularly impressed with a hybrid, because the hybrid has the promise of good fuel economy, but also it doesn't have any of the odd characteristics of a typical hybrid. So it shifts normally, the brake pedal feels normal, and it just feels like a very substantial and and very advanced kind of vehicle. So you throw it against the Toyota RAV4 and Honda CR-V, and people are going to be pretty impressed.
Yeah, I was particularly like you, drove both versions and was definitely felt like the hybrid was actually seemed like the nicer powertrain choice between the two. Especially, because you barely notice those transitions back and forth between, when it's, working as an EV or when it's working as a hybrid, when the gas engine comes back on. And I liked that, when I was going at like 40, 45 miles an hour, I needed to increase speed really pretty quickly. And, it downshifted really nicely. And then I guess the turbo came on and it just had this really nice thrust that the regular engine, just doesn't have that kind of mid-range punch. So it's nice to see a hybrid that works so well. But Ryan, I know you drove the regular version as well. What did you think about the way the engine and transmission works in the regular model, especially because that's the one we purchased for our test program?
Yeah. So, I unfortunately I didn't drive the hybrid, but I'm hearing good things about it. But the the SEL that we're going to test, I thought that it was a nice setup. It doesn't have a ton of power, but it's adequate. I mean, it shifts nicely. It's smooth. It's responsive. There's enough power to do what you need to do. The car in general is, like Gabe said, it's impressive. Definitely a step up from what it was. It's more. I think it's gonna be a more distinguished car, not fall through the cracks, like the last one did. But it's roomy. It's a nice car. I mean, I think, looks wise, it's gonna grab a lot of attention. The Hyundais they've come a long way. They make really nice stuff now. I was surprised at how well it rode, considering. I mean, ours has, I forget the size of the tires, but they're relatively low aspect ratio. Big wheels tires, and it rides pretty well.
Meaning, typically, when you have a vehicle like that you quite often compromise some ride comfort, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's got a firm edge, but it's not, not what it would look, what it would appear like it would ride, just because it's has such short sidewalls on the tires. But it's a nice car.
And I thought it was a lively little handler too. It was kind of it's a vehicle you could have some fun through the turns with. Which again, it's nice when an automaker gets that ride compromise down pretty good. Ride handling compromise, and it appears anyway. Again, these are just our first impressions, but it appears so far they got that pretty well. The interior, as you mentioned, Gabe, is pretty neat. It's neat the way they kind of like combine like the way like the dash vents kind of flow out into the door panels, and it just has a really cool look to it. What did you think about the controls, the infotainment system, and all that?
A good point. Some of the controls are a little, it's capacitive touches, so it requires an extra look to make sure that you're actually your finger is hitting the right place for climate and whatnot. Of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the push button shifter, which I'm quite dismayed about. Luckily, it's only in the high-end versions and not in most versions or in the mainstream versions. The one we bought, for instance, has a regular shifter, but that it gets a little fussy when, particularly in parking situations where you're in reverse drive and you have to take your eyes off the road and really pay attention to what button you're pressing.
Yeah, when we talk about these capacitive touch, what we mean is that it's just like a flat black screen, and when any control you want to press, whether it's on the infotainment screen or the controls below, you've got this just black panel, and you do hear a beep when you press buttons, but there's something about having an actual button that you press. And again, this is kind of an interesting thing because the more normal versions have, like our SEL doesn't have as much of this capacitive touch stuff. It has more normal controls, right? And the more traditional shift lever.
Yeah, I appreciate sometimes the little bit lower level cars because they go back to some of those basics, and those basics I think are good, like a real button or a traditional style shifter, for instance. But
one of the things I actually kind of liked about for the hybrid, you can, a lot of hybrids have, instead of a tachometer, they have like some kind of a power meter. It's a little confusing as to exactly what it's telling you, but it's showing you different, like kind of like way to be more eco or whatever. But in this Tucson hybrid, you can switch on the tachometer in any drive mode that you want, which I kind of appreciated if people are into that kind of thing. And also, that back seat is quite roomy for a small vehicle. So we do have a first drive up on our website, cr.org. Go there, check out for a much more in-depth look. Of course, we're putting break-in miles on our Tucson right now. We will have full road test results soon, so please make sure to check back on our website for those road test results. Now let's move on to audience questions. And don't forget to send those questions, comments, 30-second video clips to talkingcars@icloud.com. We particularly love the video questions because we know it takes a little more time to film that video. And speaking of videos, we have one today. We're going to start off with something, a video from Rudolph from Michigan. Let's see what Rudolph has to say.
Hey, Talking Cars. I have a 2015 Camry and it's due for new tires pretty soon. What is your take on retreaded tires? I'm just trying to figure out if there's an environmentally friendlier option than just buying new ones every time. Thank you. I'll be waiting for your answer.
All right, Ryan, what do you think?
So he brings up a good point and an interesting point. Tire retreading is for people that don't know is basically you can take a tire that's been worn out. No, there's no tread left on it. They can peel off that tread layer, and you're still left with the carcass of the tire, and they can actually apply a new tread piece to that tire, so you have a fresh tread again. This was common for tires back in the day when you only got maybe 10, 20, 30,000 miles out of them. Large truck tires today actually still do this. It's a practice they use because those big tires are expensive. There's a lot of rubber there, and when they wear out, it's a lot of waste to get rid of that. Nowadays, they're built to last way longer. I mean, tires, we see tires, they can last upwards of 70, 80,000 miles if they're properly taken care of. It's actually more environmentally friendly to buy a set of tires that last longer. The real issue comes down to now that carcass of the tire that you used for maybe, say, 60, 70,000 miles, how much more life is in that carcass itself? Modern retreading is probably better than it used to be back in the day, but you ever drive down the highway and you see a strip of rubber?
Oh, yeah.
Call them gator backs, and it's usually a big truck tire that failed. And literally the tread just peels off of it. And when that happens, you're in trouble because the tire falls apart. Now, on a large truck, there's usually they're dualies. There's usually two tires next to each other, and then there's four other ones around it. So it's holding up the load, and it's not the end of the world, but it's still fairly dangerous. Now, if one of yours did that, and you lose an entire tire on one corner of your wheel, you're in trouble, So it's just the tires they get a lot of abuse, and you're better off with a brand new set of tires.
Yeah, and
Rudolph, don't do it, basically.
Yeah, don't do it. Okay, let's move on to our next question. This comes from Tom from Orlando. Tom says, across many car brands, I'm suddenly seeing two-tone paint jobs. Did the manufacturers share this idea, or was this a case of corporate espionage between the companies? Gabe, Tom seems to be onto something here. It seems like we are seeing more, at least optional two-tone paint jobs these days, aren't we?
Yeah, it used to be a popular thing back in the day, in the 70s, but now there's a bit of a comeback in a different kind of a way, though. Mostly it's a contrasting roof, so maybe a black roof or a white roof on a car, just to add some visual interest. I mean, it's a fashion, nothing else. And doesn't cost a whole lot more to offer that. Yeah, why not? I mean, I kind of like it.
Yeah. All right. And the next question comes from Karaya. She says, I'm considering an SUV for my next lease. I had originally planned to move to Colorado, so all-wheel drive was important to me. However, I've learned I'm moving to Phoenix instead. What should I be looking for in a vehicle for the desert? I've been looking at lighter color vehicles with light interiors. Ventilated seats are a must. I don't do any off-roading. Is there anything else I should consider? Gabe, you've lived in some pretty hot places. So how do you stay cool in a hot environment, especially related to a car?
That's correct. As someone who lived in Israel and in Arizona, that I'm probably I can feel that one. So yeah, first of all, you want a killer AC that's fast and furious, that cools the cabin really quickly, and And you want to make sure that the air vents are positioned right. Nowadays, it became another fashion to have the center screen so large that it pushes the air vents, the center ones at least, to be so low that they end up cooling your elbows and knees instead of cooling your upper body and keeping your face fresh. So that's so I think she's and she's on the right track in terms of light color. And in Arizona, by the way, I lived in Tucson for a year. I bet you don't know that, but and kind of fitting for this discussion.
I didn't know that.
Tucson before. Yeah.
That's funny.
So anyway, one thing in Arizona, when it's middle of the summer and 120 degrees, the first time you touch the door handle, you can practically burn yourself. And I wish maybe car companies would come up with door hand chillers or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe I should register a patent for that.
Do it. Cooled door handles. I love
Liquid
it.
cooled, yeah.
You know, we've talked about this before on the podcast, and we have done some testing of the interiors of cars and how hot they get. Really, it was more about, showing the dangers of leaving your child in the backseat of a car for any period of time. And what we found out was just over a 1 hour period on a 78-degree day, that a light-colored car reached about 104 degrees Fahrenheit, and a dark-colored car reached about 109 degrees Fahrenheit. The point is, the light-colored one did stay a little cooler, but they both got really hot. So it's gonna help a little bit with the light-colored car, but it's not like it's gonna be night and day. The interior of the car is still gonna get hot. And also one other thing, Gabe, what do you think about this? I mean, because it's sunny so often out there in a place like Phoenix. I mean, if you can have a garage or a carport to get that car to help its paint, I think in the long term, right? Wouldn't that help to not have the sun be beating down on that paint all the time? Even just a carport, if you can get it out of the sun.
Completely, yeah. Just keep the car parked in the shade as much as you can. Protect the interior of the car, dashboard, seats, everything. So that's a good idea. And if she's looking at an SUV, she can totally get away with a front-wheel drive SUV because it's not going to be snowy, so no problem there.
All right, let's move on to our last question. This comes from Jackson from Pittsburgh. Considering the amount of cars CR has bought over the years, I'm curious, has anyone ever crashed or damaged a car you bought for your test program? Ryan, you're already laughing, so tell us, you must have a good crash story for us.
I have a very good record. I have very good record with...
of crashing or not crashing?
Not crashing test cars. No, I mean, listen, we're all human here. Accidents happen. And we, like he said, we test a lot of cars. We're driving cars every day. So, it happens. A few years ago, I was driving the Land Rover Velar, Range Rover Velar. It was a white car, and I came up to a stop sign or a stoplight. I was sitting there. It was raining pretty good, and a car came from another direction, turning towards me, and sideswiped it. Airbags went off. It was quite the to-do. The fire department showed up. Granted, it wasn't my fault, but that was my first major bang up. One time on the track, actually, this is pretty funny. I was doing tire testing, and I was driving an Acura RSX, like a 2006 or maybe a 5. This goes way back when I first started. And I was looking down at the computer, and I pushed our key fob for our gates. We have little buttons that open the arm gates to let us onto the track. And I pushed the button, and I'm looking at the computer, and I thought the gate started to go up, and it didn't. And I just drove straight into it, and it banged the car, and the gate started like chopping the car as I drove underneath it. And for years, that was my only scratch I ever put on a car, believe it or not. And then the Range Rover thing happened. But
yeah, but the Range Rover one, at least the Range Rover wasn't your fault.
It wasn't my fault.
And
yeah.
Gabe, what about you? Do you have any funny slight accident stories?
Yeah, back in the day, when we were doing our one-day trip, what we called a one-day trip, and we had tape recorders and a clipboard and a microphone and a bunch of things to deal with. And I remember coming, and we were driving in a caravan, 5 cars of that same group we were testing at the time. And I remember coming to one of the stop signs, and I was busy something. I think I was making sure the tape recorder was rolling and I wasn't on pause, and maybe filling something in the clipboard, a lot of stuff to futz with there. And So I didn't pay attention, and I bumped into the guy in front of me. No damage, nothing happened, but yeah.
Well, you got lucky. Anyway, all right. Well, that's going to do it for this week's episode. If you want to learn more about the cars and the topics that we talked about, you can click on the links in the show notes. Don't forget to send those questions, comments, 30-second video clips to talkingcars@icloud.com. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see y'all next week.